Is it going to be Kickstarter or Indiegogo?
It's only, all right. It's going to be Kickstarter. And apparently there's like, if you're Kickstarter, you're faction A, and if you're Indiegogo, you're faction B or something. I don't know. I didn't get my memo. I didn't check the box to know what team I'm supposed to be on. But apparently there's some big, like, well, if you don't do this, then I don't give a shit about any of that stuff. I don't know what y'all are doing. I like telling funny book stories. I like making cool shit. I like stuff in the 90s. So I'm going to make 90s type shit. So that's my goal.
Hey guys, welcome to Inside Comics with George McHale. Really quick, if you like this content, hit subscribe and tell a friend about it. Today my guest is BRYAN SILVERBAX. BRYAN, thanks for being on the show. Hey man.
Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. So today I want to talk about getting creative during COVID. A lot of writers and artists are having to pivot and do something different with conventions shut down, with comic book stores being closed for some of it. And I'm wondering if you can tell us what your story has been over this last year.
So I created a comic book universe called Kara Prime, and one of the characters inside the Kara Prime comic was Loggerhead, and Loggerhead was set to come out in May with Scout Comics. And then COVID hit right at the end of February when Loggerhead was in the Diamond Previews magazine. So comic book shops were ordering. And then in the middle of ordering my very first comic book ever for this dude, Diamond shut down and comic book shops were forced to close and stuff. So people had to cancel their orders and stuff like that. So I was like, oh my goodness. So needless to say, it wasn't a huge success when Loggerhead came out. It finally did end up coming out in July of 2020 when Diamond and everything got back into the groove of doing things. But I have a feeling that had 2020 have been a normal year, maybe I would have got better numbers. I don't know. It's my first comic book, so it probably sucked anyway, right? But I'll always be able to have the excuse of, if it wasn't for COVID, it would have been a #1 bestseller. But that's just me. So I was really jacked up. I spent a lot of money, and I spent a lot of time dedicated to increasing the comic book shop awareness to try to get them to order my Loggerhead book when it came out. And I was sending out emails, I was doing podcasts, I was doing everything. Get my book, it comes out in May. Get my book, comes out in May. And then all of a sudden everything fell apart. It kind of made me feel bad inside, like, aside from the whole pandemic. So I don't want to discount the fact that everything that the world was going through, it was just poorly timed for somebody who was dropping their very first comic book. So it was just a hodgepodge of BS all jumbled together. And then, man, I'm probably leading you down a rabbit hole. You're just like, what is this dude rambling on about?
No,
so sure. 2020 was bad. I did know I didn't do, I think I did maybe 2 conventions in 2020, and that was towards the tail end of the year when some people were like, well, hell, we'll just give it a try. And so we did a convention with the mascot, but I didn't make any money. So being someone who makes their money from going to shows and peddling my comic books and my fan art and my others, all that stuff, like when I do shows like Dragon Con and Magic City Con and all these other different conventions, that's how I pay my rent. And so what I started to do, I noticed that everybody online was now like, we've got this online con, we've got an online con, we've got an online con. And everybody wanted to watch these, all the customers, all the nerds, all the geeks, everybody wanted to watch these online conventions, but nobody was buying a single thing from me being on their show. They're like, we've got online con so and so. And then I'd be like, hi, my name's Brian. Here's some cool shit that I drew. Here's some stuff that I did. Here's some stuff that I wrote. And all you got to do is just message me and I'll get some stuff sent out to you. And dude, it was crickets for like 4 months, like nothing. So I was just like, I need to use this time to just continue to make content so that when conventions do come back, I will have this this stockpile of content that I've written, drawn, covers, or whatever. So I just kept working, but money, I had to. Money only came around with commissions.
So did you end up doing some commissions then?
I ended up scrounging together enough commission work to keep afloat. And 2020 was the year that probably I got most of my like a good deal of professional work got done in 2020 for me. So I did the loggerhead thing, and then this guy sees that the kind of work that I'm doing, and he asked me for a cover. This guy asked me for a cover. This comic book shop asked for an exclusive cover, and it just started snowballing from there. And those things kind of equaled money as well. So bills are starting to get paid, and I just want to know that 2021, like, if that snowball of getting bills paid and becoming more and more established inside the comic book industry as a whole, and I'm doing shows like that, I can't wait for that to happen.
I'm kind of in the same boat. 2019 was my first real year doing comics. I did like 18 cons and just like dove head first into it. And I had one book. And then 2020, I quit my day job right in March. And just as like the whole world kind of went to shit. Yeah. So it's tough. And this year I've been kind of just building my portfolio, right? And you know, in 2019 I had one book. 2021 I should have 3 books to sell, you know. So yeah, it's been a year of just making and creating and preparing for this, for the eventual end of this kind of drought.
I'm hoping, and I said this when the pandemic started, after everybody started getting locked down. I said, I hope that people are using this time that you're forced to be like, not go out and not do things, not go to the movies, like pound the pavement with your creativity. Write that book you always talked about writing about. Write that, write the screenplay you always wanted to. Draw that comic book. Do those paintings. Like, I hope people took advantage of the time that they were forced to not do what they normally would and focus on their creative stuff.
Talking about the true you, I was reading through your profile there, and it sounds like you know, you had a career in the military, you worked as a police officer, and then kind of a little bit later in life, you kind of went into being an artist professionally. and I'm wondering if you can talk about, you know, how did that journey go, and what kind of convinced you to kind of take the plunge full time?
I don't want to mislead anybody. It's not all good. But so in the mid 90s, I was a high school student, and that's when I fell in love with comic books, but there was no internet, right? So I thought I could draw a little bit, and I sent my stuff off to Marvel and DC and Dark Horse, and I got all the rejection letters back, and I was like, well, I guess I suck. So I went and joined the Army because I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. So I joined the Army, did that for some years. made babies, got married, got out of the army, was a janitor for a while. And during this whole time, I've pretty much stopped drawing. And then while I was a janitor, I tried out to go to the police academy because it paid better. Not because I had this yearning desire to protect or anything, but I was like, hey, I was pretty good in the army. I liked how shit went over there. Maybe I'll just do that now and I'll get paid more money than being a janitor. Well, I passed the police academy. And while I was in the police academy, I also graduated from the Art Institute online because I was going to the Art Institute online while I was a janitor. And then right as I finished up the police academy at the same time, so I graduated the police academy and the Art Institute like in the same 2 week period in
Wow.
my life. And then I was like, well, I'm already a policeman, so I guess I'm not going to do any graphic design stuff. So I policed for a long time. And then in 2013, um, a police friend of mine showed me this website where people were drawing fan art and putting it on t-shirts and making some money. And I was like, oh, wow, you can do that? I said, I used to be able to draw. I can kind of draw. So once he exposed me to the fact that now the internet, I knew the internet existed, but now that I found that there's a way to use social media and the internet and your art ability to make some money, go do it. And so I started watching YouTube tutorials. I set up a Facebook page. I set up all kinds of stuff. And then I started gaining traction and I started making a little money. I was like, oh shit, I'm making money. So I had my full-time job as a police officer, and then I had my mad money, which I could buy PlayStations and video games and whatever else I wanted. I could do that with my art money. And then I started doing shows. I was like, oh, I can do shows. And then I was like, oh, people like my stuff. I'll put it on t-shirts. I'll put it on. And then so I was a police officer, and then I was still a police officer, and I was still doing conventions as a fan art guy at the same time. But being a police officer, you got to work weekends, you got to work holidays. It's tough to get time off. But I was trying my best to get to as many places as I could during 2014, maybe 2014-ish. And then one time I ended up doing some outside of being a police officer, like off duty. I was at home doing stuff or whatever. I got into some trouble and I ended up having to quit being a police officer just to make things. And I was like, well, shit, it's a good thing I was doing all this art stuff because now I need to generate some money. So that's kind of the pivot that my life took.
That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. And you're happier now that you're following your art passion?
Well, I'm happier now that I don't have to worry about being shot at. I'm happier now that I get to interact with people that appreciate me for what I'm doing because in the area where I worked as a police officer, the police weren't liked, right? So it's an unrewarding, it's a job where even if you do a good job, nobody likes you. And that can play mind games with you on top of all the other the stuff that you have to see and the stuff that you have to do, like all of that it's mentally taxing to do that. Although I do miss what I do miss about that is the regularity of the paycheck and the insurance that I was getting, like those and the camaraderie that I got about feeling that the guys that I worked with, knowing that someone had your back. Like those are the elements of what I miss about being a police officer that I'm not getting now. So now I have no insurance. I've got the VA health insurance, and that's just like enough to keep you from dying. And I have like maybe 5 friends, and 3 of them only give a shit about me. Like, so so my world is very different, but I, I am happy doing my artwork stuff, and I'm happy. So yes, I am. I'm 45 years old, right? And it's a little late, I'm a little long in the tooth to be starting to break into comic books and stuff. But with the amount of information that people have access to through the internet, with all the tutorials and all the stuff like that, and the access to inspirational stories and how to's and stuff like that, there's no reason that anybody should not be able to follow some creative passion that they've been yearning to do.
It's awesome, dude. So you are preparing a Kickstarter for your next project now, and I'm wondering if you can tell us about that that project.
Kara Prime anthology project. So I took a whole bunch of characters, and late last year I did a Kickstarter for my connected comic book universe called Kara Prime, and in that handbook it was a bunch of different like backstories for all the different characters. And then now this anthology project is short tales of a lot of those characters that were featured in that handbook, to try to give you like a little bit more information about the characters that were in the handbook. But so Kara Prime is the connected comic book universe that I created. And the first introduction was with Loggerhead through Scout Comics. But there's so many more characters and stuff that I need to like help people to help expose. So this Kara Prime handbook, or the Tales from Kara Prime, is going to be an anthology project that launches in April, where we take roughly 15 characters out of the handbook and tell 15 separate stories, one for each of them. And then we have 15 different writers, and we have 15 different artists all on this project to kind of get to make sure that we've got something for everybody. You like this character, you like this artist, you like this writer, you like this type of thing. Like, all of that's going to be in here, and it's all in a connected universe, which is one of the things that I think independent comic books lacks. All that to say this, on April 13th, I'm launching the Kickstarter that has some tales to kind of wet your whistle and get you ready for the stuff that's coming. But
That's
this
awesome.
is the Kara Prime handbook that is just backstories for all the characters that we're going to see inside of the anthology. And in the anthology, every character has at least 5 pages of a story that you're going to get to see.
Sounds incredible. Bryan, I want to thank you for being on Inside Comics. I hope everyone will go out and check out your Facebook page, check out your Instagram page, friend you, subscribe, and then check out your Kickstarter when it launches in April. Thanks for being on Inside Comics.
Well, thank you for having
Peace.
me, man.